He explains that the character of Yoda in particular, quote, was created with Zen in mind. But he explains this wasn't supposed to be a sectarian kind of thing. Lucas was heavily influenced by the popular mythologist Joseph Campbell. Robinson says, Lucas learned from Joseph Campbell that underlying religious mythologies are archetypal patterns which reflect universal truth. End quote. He later adds, quote, Star Wars mythology is an intentional expression of archetypal truth. And then he adds that as part of that larger vision, quote, Yoda is intended to be a motif for universal wisdom. So Robinson is suggesting that Yoda in particular is clearly a Zen portrait, but he's a Zen portrait intended to represent archetypal wisdom in a Joseph Campbell mythological kind of way. So that's his final paragraph of the chapter. So I found this a really fascinating chapter. I think it's really cool, especially to hear his observations about the specific influences that were consciously used in the Star Wars films, such as the name of the Jedi and the use of Eastern swordplay techniques, etc. I think what I found most interesting in this chapter was the observation that George Lucas was heavily influenced by Joseph Campbell and Campbell's particular archetypal way of interpreting myth, so that, as Robinson puts it, Star Wars mythology is an intentional expression of archetypal truth. Which makes a lot of sense because Star Wars does end up having kind of a mythological feel to it. And I think it could be argued that Star Wars is kind of the closest thing we have in modern America to a broadly shared mythology, particularly now that the Lord of the Rings saga is waning in popularity. Now, the fact that it aspires to be archetypal doesn't mean that it actually is this kind of even-handed balance of all global mythology or the root of global mythology, if such a thing could even be discovered. The story is clearly a Zen Buddhist interpretation for the most part, I think. But I think that the Campbell reference is interesting because it shows that Lucas wasn't merely aiming to syncretize or to blend concepts for commercial success, let's say, but he was actually aiming to create a timeless story that gets at the core of humanity and speaks the language of myth in a modern but also a multicultural global kind of way.